Well, I'm Kale. I'm the membership point of contact at ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, and I live in Garrison in Putnam County. And we'll talk about what ICLEI is all about, but we have some technical work streams that we call them pathways, and I have a more technical role for the nature and the resilience pathway, um, and then serve as this kind of membership coordinator. So I'm very happy to meet some of my neighbors in the Hudson Valley, and it's always so nice to see Vanessa and Paige. Um, and then maybe we can I really just want to know where people are located.
So yeah, so all these folks are from Columbia, Ulster, or Dutchess County.
Great. Thank you for that. So now I will do my screen share. It's so nice to meet everybody. And the point today is for you to feel like you've met ICLEI and you know that what we're about. I know that part of your program, which is so awesome, is this opportunity to be with us for another year. Some emails have gone out about dues and all that. We can talk about it, but just know that we're very flexible for when the start and end date are, and just trying to get a sense of the time frame for when we'll be working together. ICLEI is an international organization, what we call a city network. Over the past 5 or 6 years, there's been kind of a proliferation of city networks, working on all kinds of things, climate, but like divestment, disarmament, gun policy, all kinds of city networks have formed. But ICLEI is the only one that is focused entirely on holistic sustainability in a community. So that's climate, but also work beyond climate, equity, nature, this sort of thing. We have a special role with the United Nations and the international community as the focal organization for cities and towns and villages and counties on climate, biodiversity, and land degradation. So something of an advocacy and like voice of cities role is what we play, which has some relevance to what we do with Hudson Valley communities too, just opportunities to collaborate with small towns and cities all over the world. We are also special in being the network for smaller communities. I think the only climate or sustainability focused network that works mostly with cities under 100,000, and a quarter are under 25,000. So a lot of small places all over the US, but the Northeast is a real stronghold for us. And I show this map because actually Hudson Valley communities are about 10 to 12% of ICLEI members. So this region is a driving force for climate action for the whole country. A lot of what comes out of the Hudson Valley, like pioneering vulnerability assessments, is a good example. That process has now contributed to the way that works in communities everywhere. So I'm excited to think about working with you to really drive the state of the practice forward, for the bigger ICLEI community, and really centering that close to home here in the Hudson Valley. So I mentioned we worked across a pathways approach, meant to be holistic sustainability. The low emission pathway is what we're probably most famous for. Developer of protocols on greenhouse gas inventories and tools and this kind of thing. But really going back to ICLEI's roots, we work across climate, the low emissions, more and more no emissions, also nature, equity, resilience, and circular economy. Tends to be a zero waste kind of focus here in the US. These are separate pathways, but they hardly ever operate like that. A climate action plan should have all of these elements represented. What you get as an ICLEI member is the tools, frameworks, and a technical advisor to support on each of these pathways. So each one has a set of resources to help you move forward. Here in the low emission, we follow a carbon neutrality framework where kind of special to ICLEI, adaptation and resilience in general is our entry point to carbon neutrality. We recognizing that we've got to address climate issues today, structural, social problems, all of these kinds of things, if we're ever going to have a chance to mitigate climate change. And then we're very data driven. You all will know that from the ClearPath tool and our modeling and stuff. So we start with this analyze, baseline, set a baseline, set a goal. From there, you are creating a climate action plan. Then the hard work starts of implementing the plan here in this later stage of the act of the donut. And then accelerating is, improving over time, but then we think also connecting with your peer communities. So you as the champions are already, you're actually working in all stages of this donut right now. And then reaching toward carbon neutrality. And we can talk more about that kind of deep dive stuff. I won't go through every pathway, just to show that each one of these tends to have a framework and tools and resources. So our nature-based has a biodiversity action plan that can easily integrate with a climate plan. Great. So we work through a member journey model. So when you start with ICLEI, that it could be August 1st this year, or it could be August 1st next year, whenever you're ready to start, we'll map a member journey. And that's looking at a 3-month calendar all the way out to a 3-year calendar if we want. And we're meeting with you and me as the membership lead, and then the technical, at least one ICLEI technical advisor, and saying, what is Northeast priorities over the next 3 months, and plotting that on a calendar, like a Gantt chart view. And then what will ICLEI be able to support for those priorities? It may be a cohort training. You all are in a cohort right now, but ICLEI has these member cohorts that work together and that could be a great place to jump into one of those next year when your champions work is wrapping up. Other, just bilateral calls with your neighbors or communities across the US. We schedule, regular check-ins with your technical advisor. And then planning, but climate action planning is a big part of what we do. So there's, technical reviews, there's data quality checks that your ICLEI point of contact will help you with. Really just like, what's it going to take to get your priorities accomplished? Here's what ICLEI will do. Here's what you do. It's a very a partnership that we put on this example here. We do actually have an example of what this looks like. We use Google Shared Drive, so we're just live, all of us moving these little highlights around, making notes, and every time we check in, we are adjusting. You'll see here on the left that we can align the member journey with the pathways, if that makes sense. And often it can be just useful to make sure that we're addressing everything that should go in a plan, let's say. Great. So that was kind of just overview of how we work. I hope that was clear that every ICLEI member has a dedicated technical advisor. For the Hudson Valley, that is me. And then I have a support person, Eli Udall. So you'll see Eli's name around. He's been here way longer than me. He's not, I'm probably more his support than he is mine, but we help each other to serve the Hudson Valley communities. So you have a real person to be, having regular check-ins with you, this sort of thing. And so what we tend to do at the Hudson Valley is align with climate smart communities and help you reach your goals. We know that you get your points, and you're asked to create things like greenhouse gas inventories, model climate actions, perform a gap analysis of what adaptation considerations are missing from like a master plan or something like this. Many ways to get points, and ICLEI can be a support for a lot of them. Not all of them, not every uh, PE7 or whatever, all the designations, not everyone has an ICLEI support mechanism, but most definitely do. And we have aligned our framework, that one, the donut I showed, with the DEC guidance and what they would like to see. I'm going to not keep on slides the whole time and do a little short form tools demo so that you can get a sense of what tools you have available through your ICLEI membership. The most widely used is ClearPath, and that is a climate tool in general. So a lot of people know it as a greenhouse gas inventory tool. It's used by over 1,000 communities. It's definitely the most widely used in the US. But what it will allow you to do, coming in here, you'll see here at the top, these tabs, is you can create inventories. And then when you have an inventory in place, you're able to forecast how emissions are projected to change for Germantown out to 2030, out to 2100. And then layer on other factors that influence emissions trajectories. Like, we know the new Climate Act for New York has clean electricity stipulations. So we can layer that assumptions in, and it changes the forecast. Let me see if I can just go to a visual so you have a sense of what these even look like. So you can see someone's making a test for a food waste emissions profile forecast. Let's see if Mike here created one of these. Let's see what we've got. Okay, this is a decent enough example of a forecast for a community. You can see that forecasts are just like the inventory itself, that's sector based. So in a government operations, inventory and forecast and plan, you're looking at things like buildings and facilities for the government, fleet, employee commute, and solid waste produced by the government. And then you're projecting out, this community is looking out to 2025. We're in the buildings tab, right? So they've layered on assumptions. Let's see if we can see what they are, about high growth scenario. Some of these could be a little more specific, because you can see here a utility goal of 40% emissions reduction by 2030. So we've established these growth rates, and then you're just turning them on and off. You're adding in layers of information, and that influences the forecast, so that you're able to go back to your community and say, New York's Climate Act is going to get us part of the way to Germantown's goal, but we're going to need to do more. And then the tool has a step for that too. Let's now think about what the more means. Is that adding 5 miles of bike lane? Is that putting, a solar farm within city limits? What would it take to reach hopefully carbon neutrality is some sort of goal that everyone's thinking about. So I just want to show you the planning module is really I think it's the most powerful step here. And so you get this kind of wedge diagram. Again, this sample community, Mikeville, projected out to 2035. You can look out to 2050. And then you've got your business as usual line. Maybe Paige or Vanessa, was creating a greenhouse gas inventory part of the Champions program?
No, not specifically part of local champions. However, there are some in our cohort who've already done this with their task force. such as Christina in Germantown. I don't know if they did this kind of forecasting, but they already have, I think they've come, Christina, you can speak more to this, completed that action. And then I know with Jen will be in that 9 municipality CAPI program. So, already working with ICLEI using this tool for that. So yeah, this might be a tool that some of the other cohort members might be interested in using. What do you guys think? And Christina, are you already completed with your greenhouse gas inventory?
We are completed, but we didn't do any like future modeling. So we have 2016 to 2020 inventoried, but no modeling.
Great, that's very helpful to know where people are at in the process.
And
And
what
so,
about
mhm.
Madeline or Chow? Have your task forces done greenhouse gas inventory yet? Or Chow, that's what you're talking about. Your RFP is just going out for that.
Right, but we've also done a sort of a warm up. We did benchmarking of municipal buildings. So that's sort of setting up some of the task force members to do this work.
And Madeline, how about you?
We have not started this. We do have somebody on our ECC who does benchmarking for residential buildings who's offered to get the process started, but that's as far as we've gotten. It's just identifying somebody to take it on.
Great. Thank you all for that update. So some communities may be ready to do a greenhouse gas inventory, and that's a perfect place to start with your ICLEI membership. We can work with a consultant, we can work with volunteers, we can work with high school students or some other intern. College students tend to work a little bit better at these, but there's lots of ways to go about tackling the inventory. When you have that done, then it gets into that action modeling that Christina might be getting ready for, where it's, the miles of bike lane, a neighborhood weatherization program, and you're choosing start and end years, you're clicking them on and off till you arrive at a profile for your community that ideally is getting to 0, or whatever your goal might be, an 80% reduction or something. So you can see which sectors are the problem sectors, which actions are the biggest, emissions reducers, that sort of thing. Great. I do want to just point out a couple more tools. We won't need to spend as long, but they're kind of next generation, let's say. One of them is our Learn tool, which is about emissions associated with trees and land use. So scrolling in here, there we go. It's starting to.
I just got to say, this is so cool. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, good. Yeah, this one's pretty brand new. And we are very excited to have partnered with Woodwell Climate, the climate researchers, and WRI to produce a map of the Hudson Valley here that is looking at changes in land use patterns over time. So it's a time change deal where you're choosing a start year and an end year, and then seeing how I think it's at the parcel level, it's definitely at the county level, but it's more refined than county, but which forests have transitioned to shrubland, which wetlands have reduced in an acre in size. These are the kinds of things that you can learn in here, and then it assigns an emissions value. So very powerful, you can see, especially the counties that you all live in, for making the case that conservation is a key component of a climate plan. And starts to, let you value your natural lands as climate solutions more. So that's a layer, to add on to an inventory, let's say, or even as simple as just a few insights to create a page or two in your final climate plan. Yeah, so that is being used. I'm trying to think.
Can you
Ulster
show us how
County
it
is
looks
using
like
this.
if you go
Mhm.
back in time, how it shifts?
Oh yeah, let's try to adjust the.
We can do so much with this. This is incredible. I'm so excited.
Yes. Let's see if. So there's like these visuals, but then it's the data that you download out of the tool that I'm sure a very smart person could really put to good use. Because you just see some pixels changing here, but that's to get you a sense of should I be downloading this, piece of data from this view, and then you can work from there. And that in your ICLEI advisor, Eli, we also have Tom on our team who's would help you interpret the numbers. What does this actually mean for emissions change in Northeast or wherever you are doing this for? So
This is so cool, Kale. In Dutchess County, our parcel access mapping has a layer where you can shift from different aerial photography all the way back to like 1930, I think. And you can see as the shrublands are growing up into forests, and then you can see when land is converted or trees are cut down and it goes into farmland. So that
your
would be
parcel
a
mapping does
combination.
that? Your county's parcel mapping website does that?
It's incredible. Historical aerial photos. I don't think
Wow.
other counties do, but Dutchess is
No.
really interesting.
No, wow, that's
absolutely. Very powerful, and not many, not many communities in the US have that kind of data. Okay, so the last tool showcase we'll look at here, let me plug in my computer, but it's from our temperate tool, which is our climate adaptation and vulnerability assessment tool. This one, it's kind of like the ClearPath. ClearPath was really focused on emissions reduction. Temperate was created in order to have that same kind of step-by-step process, baseline setting for climate adaptation. So this is the PE7 points in Climate Smart on vulnerability assessment through adaptation planning. I will preface right at the start, this is the only thing I'll talk about today that is an additional charge on top of an ICLEI membership. There's a license fee to use this tool because we work with a tools developer to keep it's updated almost daily with local climate data. We're looking at Philadelphia because that's where the developer is based, but it would give Germantown, here is your climate data. And so the license fee is $1,500, $1,500 for a year. You wouldn't tend to need this longer than a year. It's not something that many communities renew, although Ulster County did renew. But I think it works best for a succinct project to do a vulnerability assessment. And it's not out of reach even for small budgets if you are applying for a grant. So like New Paltz worked with us and they got a DEC grant to do a vulnerability assessment, and the license fee was part of that. One other way that you can access this is we do our cohorts every year. And this year we're doing one where 18 communities have free access to temperate. So ICLEI paid for that. And we are likely to do another round of that. And that would be probably the middle of 2022 at the earliest. So a number of ways. Of course, if it's making it so you don't have to hire an expensive consultant to do the work, then it is cost effective that way. So I won't spend as much time. I just want to show you that what the tool does is give you local climate data. Let me open one of these so you can see what that means. This is using the top 22 most trusted climate models out there in the world. And then you're able to turn on, let's see what we're saying. If you are a climate scientist, I guess you'd know what all these models mean, but you can turn on the ones that you want to use. By far, most communities just leave them all on, and it gives you that average. There's so much data that works into it that it takes a while to get going. But then you're getting, this is an average high temperature projection for Philadelphia, and you're adjusting the date ranges, going back to look at historical, which is actual data, in the center line here, out to back to 1950, and then all the way up to 2100. And you see some pretty dramatic changes. And I know from New Paltz, and I guess it would be Rochester would have similar results, but it's something like number of heat waves end up being so frequent over time that you're looking at entire seasons of 90-degree plus days. Looks like Philadelphia is not suffering as bad as actually some of the Ulster County communities. And so you are able to then take the data out of the tool and do a people-centered process. This is where climate adaptation tends to not be so similar to mitigation, in that it's very people focused, at least for us at ICLEI, and about workshopping and talking about people's felt experience with climate change today and what community assets and systems are most impacted. And what temperate does is give you the anticipated hazards for your community. So these are for Philadelphia. And then what you're doing with that, when your community driven process is assessing risk, assessing vulnerability. So for that hazard, what's the potential impact, and what's the ability of that community system, as we say, to adapt? We're looking at, cold waves and agriculture here. That's what that one happened to be. And it looked like pretty severe vulnerability, in that there was a high impact, and then the adaptive capacity of agriculture to change, to get, to be more resilient, was low. And so that ended up making this more in the red. And that's, how you're doing that scaling and like ranking is with your community members, workshops and surveys. And then the outputs from this tool go to DEC. And we've had good luck with 4 or 5 New York communities getting all their points to do this process. Great. I will just say, if you have like a great local university that has excellent climate data for your region, then we can do this whole process with you outside of a tool like this. The tool is just what we call the TurboTax of climate adaptation. It just makes it very straightforward to do that. Great. So go back to my slides. I want to make sure we've got plenty of time. So I'm just going to do like an overview of some projects that we've done in your neighboring communities. Oops, get through here quickly. We talked about cohort trainings. We've got all kinds of self-paced learning videos. Just know that our resource library is pretty extensive. Yeah, since we're going through these slides, we have ability to connect you to a range of, I guess, working groups is what you would call them. They're global, so you'd be with little towns and big cities all over the world, connecting on things like sustainable food systems in our city food network, or sustainable purchasing in our procurement network. There's nature, circular economy, 100% renewables. I think that's really the power of being an ICLEI village or ICLEI city, is that connection to a network, and ability to engage globally. I sent these slides to Vanessa and Paige, so you'll get these. But I want to end the presentation view with just a kind of flyover of how some of this ICLEI membership has worked on the ground. This is in New Paltz. So we use the temperate tool for a vulnerability assessment, and then took that data and went to this is a town board meeting, but we did a series, some with the full community, some with the town board members, and said, okay, we know heat wave duration could last 3 months at a time every year. What does that mean for different assets around town? And so you've got all these, we did this mapping exercise where it's people are writing down what the impact from that heat would be. We taped up all the hazards on the side, and we would put strings, here's the most impacted by ice storms or whatever it might be. So we call it the web of climate vulnerability, because it ended up being like a big spider web of hazard and community system pairings. And that vulnerability assessment's a great example online. We really use it just as a template from there, because that project worked out really well, and they got all their climate smart points. Here's where I live, my backyard. Almost literally, I'm so lucky to have the marsh there, just down the road. But in Phillipstown, we did an innovative greenhouse gas inventory, is what we called it. So it was your standard inventory, but then we layered on the land use considerations. What were trees and wetlands and these sequestering from the total emissions profile? And then Phillipstown wanted to go even a step further and think about household consumption. So when people are making food choices at the grocery store, what does that impact emissions for the town? Where people go on vacation, when they remodel their home, what's the construction materials they're using? And so this is all survey based, where we got something like 300 households to respond, which was really good. And people got really into it, figuring out what their household consumption emissions were, and then that contributed to the inventory. It is a very ambitious project. I'm not saying like everyone on the line will go this route next year or something, but pieces of it can definitely be brought in. And they got a grant to do this too. This was also a DEC grant. So some things can require grant funding. Some things are easily tackled with a volunteer task force and your ICLEI membership. This is an example of that, of like, here's purely membership funded. In Hastings-on-Hudson, Mayor Armacost is one of our Race to Zero climate neutrality or carbon neutrality leaders. We have a campaign called the ICLEI 150 in the Race to Zero. So 150 communities around the country. We're at around 35, so we absolutely would welcome you all to join us in the 150 race. And then we're working on a plan for climate neutrality. And that's starting with your inventory. Like a lot of what we talked about when we looked at ClearPath puts you on this path. You're just modeling actions, or actually ICLEI is modeling actions for you that show you how to get to carbon neutrality. This plan's kind of special because if you sign on to the ICLEI 150, then ICLEI will be you don't have to do as much calculation on your side. ICLEI will create a 2030 science-based target is what we call it, but a Paris Agreement goal, what you'd need to reduce by 2030, and then model these highest impact actions. Switching your fleet to EVs, something like that's probably a high impact action. So showing time frame and all this kind of stuff for how you can reach carbon neutrality. Oh yeah, here are some of the actions. You get this little output diagram that fits right into a climate action plan. All of this work is a great foundation of a climate action plan. And so we're doing that with Hastings and a few other communities, and providing the recognition for it. There's kind of the leaders side, recognizing the mayor or a council member or town select person. And then there's the technical side, you know, all that modeling and the target setting. And you get both with that Race to Zero work. I bring this up because every year of ICLEI membership, we have some kind of special thing that goes on. This one happens to be what's going on now and into next year. And then end with a couple non Hudson Valley projects, but really good ones to be aware of. We've worked in California, in Hayward, with one single neighborhood to launch a youth climate ambassadors program. It was called Unite to Green, but we were training and supporting high school students to go door to door and talk to their neighbors about it was heat and flooding, so the top hazards, and they provided a packet of materials, I think like CFL light bulbs and this kind of stuff that the utility provided, but then it was like a mini workshop that you could do in 5 minutes with their neighbors, and that was super successful because these folks in the neighborhoods are not, you know, they don't care what me or Tom or Eli have to say, but they really care what the kids in their neighborhoods have to say. So that was a nice equity pathway example. And then another final one that's kind of cross-cutting in that, you know, a lot of what we talked about today is climate focused, but more and more communities have an interest in thinking, you know, holistically about sustainability, and the UN's SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, are an approach or a framework that really do that well. So we are working with Beacon, and this is an Orlando example, but to align city processes and the sustainability plan with the SDGs. So, you know, making sure, you know, budgets and processes are contributing to goals that you want to see happen in your community. Obviously, that's a very deep dive effort, but just know that, you know, down the line, your ICLEI membership could take you there. This is me and Eli. We're ready to help you in these ways. They're listed here because you'll get the slides, but we talked about a lot of what those are. And then I think that was it. So I'll stop slides.
Thank you so much, Cal. This is super helpful and really exciting.
Well, we're like so excited that you worked it all out that this could happen. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of all of you very soon.
Thank you so much.
Great. Well, have a good day, everyone.
You
Great.
too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.